having a good day. The panels this morning have been amazing. I'm going to tee up our next panel, which is titled Generative AI's Impact on Human Creators and DEIA. Should I hold it? Or it should be even better. Generative AI's Impact on Human Creators and DEIA. I'm going to tee up a really phenomenal panel to have a conversation, but first talk a little bit about what we know. So a lot is evolving in the technological landscape right now. Things like words we use, phrases, things we think about, they're not always perfect, right? When we say AI, that means a lot of things. It might mean some things to some people. Is it machine learning? Is it something that's shown up embedded in my PowerPoint? What is it? And so we're going to present a little bit of research that partners in this room funded throughout the fall and spring to understand this question as it relates specifically to the entertainment industries and how it's being utilized, how it's being deployed, and what we know really from the C-suite. There's been a lot of work out there talking about impacts from individual artists, animators, what they're seeing, what job bids and things like that are asking for, whether that's in traditional animation, film, or adjacent industries like advertising, for example. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do know and what we're thinking about. Um, First of all, I want to say this is a conversation that is across all industries. Right now, no industry feels super secure in terms of exposure to AI. So a lot of the work is looking at how media, entertainment, communications, these industries map onto exposure from other industries that the economy really relies on in terms of employment opportunity. Our research asked a series of questions to 300 folks that are in the C-suites of different organizations. I want to set the table a little bit and talk about the three buckets of AI technology we asked about and the sample tools and software that were being used, right? Everyone thinks about ChatGPT as like an umbrella term that has a lot of plugins, different things that are being rolled out. Um, even that is its own conceptual bucket is starting to be a little misleading in terms of the kind of tools that are underneath that umbrella or those tools that are being fed into other adjacent software packages. In our study, we asked really about three sets of buckets: text, audio, and what we labeled visual. In the text, this is things like ChatGPT, this is Bard AI, ChatSonic, Storyboard AI, and the sample task applications that the C-suites of these industries saw being deployed. Our questions, we asked two sets of questions. The most important one being, where are you in terms of system-wide implementation? Are you interested or are you not? There's been a lot of experimentation in different industries where somebody might have their own like license copy of ChatGPT they're using for their own personal use, and maybe they sneak in and use it a little bit here and there. We were asking about trying to understand the difference between those one-off third-party application uses that maybe your personal life is blending into your work life, and system-wide investment in terms of thinking about the workflows and the impacts and ultimately the cost structures. I think that's what ultimately, when we think about these sets of tools and applications, the cost structures of what humans cost in the set of incentives we've built in the United States around hiring people or investing in equipment, software, and other ways that we may incentivize or not through the rules and regulations we have in place. The second bucket was audio, so things like Deep Composer, Jukebox, Dance Diffusion, and finally visual, Midjourney, DALL-E, Deep Dream, and the kind of outputs that came from those. So those are the three main buckets when we were talking about trying to define what folks were thinking about and what they were using. I would say a lot of this isn't necessarily new depending on where you sit in the industry, right? So machine learning, if you've been in the visual effects industry, those toolkits have been out there for quite a while. Anything that's large data, tackling repetitive tasks, some of our panelists are experts from the kind of computer science side, but those things that are easy to learn, rote, repetitive things, In economics, there's been automation literature for a long time. The things that are easy, that are maybe repetitive, or that can easily be coded into yes or no's, ones or zeros, that kind of idea. Some of that's been very much available in visual effects and post production for a while. It's just been labeled machine learning. Some of that is still what we're talking about here, but in terms of what we were asking about in this survey, we really focused on those toolkits. I throw this up here really quick, and this is an overwhelming slide. I pulled from a number of different methodologies because right now there are a lot of wild numbers swinging, whether it's a Goldman Sachs estimate, Indeed, LinkedIn, et cetera. The thing I want to point out in the literature kind of across all of these studies is that the entertainment industry, communications, software, which includes video games, these are very high on all of these different methodologies in terms of AI exposure. This is very different historically than what we've seen over the years as new technology is rolled out. Oftentimes, the creative industries have been immune because the work product wasn't always repetitive or similar. And as you can see here across these, and I've highlighted in each of the different ones, a study from LinkedIn, a study from OpenAI themselves, and a study from the Indeed Hiring Lab, LinkedIn, and OpenAI. All of these include the industries that are in this room very high. These are truncated lists of industries across the economy. So it's not just a one-off survey of C-suite folks I'm going to present to you. This is uniformly being reported out on as a set of industries that has high exposure. Now, exposure is different than disruption, is different than a job going away. And I think that's going to be really important to think about as we look toward updating our regulatory landscape. Jobs are buckets of tasks each day. So there's parts of my job that may be very susceptible to some of these applications. It's really about kind of the tipping point. How much of your set of tasks in the work you do is really vulnerable? And what does that mean in terms of maybe other incentives, whether that's regulatory, the tax code in a specific jurisdiction? How do those two interact in terms of what we can forecast about job growth or contraction? As I mentioned, I'm not gonna, this data is available online. I believe there's a QR code in the program. We wanted to make sure we weren't just getting a story from small, scrappy entrepreneurial producers, firms, et cetera. We worked really hard to build a sample across size and location. And so there wasn't any sort of correlation in terms of, is this something that like smaller shops are standing up because they're overworked as it is? It was uniform across both the global revenue, number of employees. So this is being tackled kind of internally in all of these different size organizations. To tee up this panel, I just want to flag a few of the highlights. As I mentioned, about 72% of firms considered to be early adopters, meaning about a quarter, 24% said they have a program that they are working on that's in place. That maps onto what the federal government has released recently with information, which includes motion picture, sound, et cetera, as being about a quarter that are implementing actively generative AI. The rest said they're at the early stages. About 75%, so 3/4 of respondents indicated these tools, software models had supported the elimination, reduction, or consolidation of jobs in their business division. That, with most things in economics, you can never do as good of a job as you want of unpacking the other things in the economy that are going on at the same time. But over the period of last 3 years is what the questions asked about. During that period of turmoil, these tools were seen as allowing the workforce to kind of be reorganized in order to facilitate cost savings. About 36% of respondents mentioned that this technology had reduced the need for certain skills and daily tasks among their staff. About 57% of, and this is the C-suite, right? This is the corporate leadership of that group. About almost 60% said their own employees had raised concerns regarding ethical implication of some of these models and the originating data sets. 90%, almost all, said it's going to play a larger role, with 26% saying this is going to be a significantly larger role over the next 3 years. I'm going to skip over most of these in terms of the what it can do. The thing I think I want to flag and tee up for this conversation to the extent I can is that new technology has integrated into filmmaking, television, the creative industries, a number of points over time. I think the real difference here is the combination of this new technology with new cloud capabilities, new production technologies in adjacent areas. And ultimately, what this report fleshes out is that new workflows and new cost structures are what's falling out of these things kind of coming together. Cloud computing, the workflows. I think people often talk about, oh, the creative industries that they digitized, 10, 20 years ago. That's a little misleading, right? We digitized, we had disruption around distribution of content. The production, in a lot of ways, has really been the production of Charlie Chaplin. Like how things are made for the last 100 years. Yeah, okay, we've tweaked a little bit. But as an economist, if I'm thinking about this industry like I would other industries, the factory floor looks the same as it has. And what this technology is going to do is ultimately change the factory floor. So the distribution side, we're like, oh, we digitized. Well, not the production. And that is where the reality is going to be. And that's in part because of the cloud computing and other production technologies that are coming to a head. Um, as you can see here, developing 3D assets for film, television, video games, cinematography, virtual worlds, realistic sound design, voices for film, television. I mean, there's examples you can take a quick Google run through the Hollywood Reporter. I think it was the Wilt Chamberlain new documentary film has him narrating or doing some AI versions of him narrating. There's just tons of examples where we've got some experimentation that's out there in the world. And you can see all the way down to developing 2D artwork for film, television, storyboards. So all of these at different levels are really potentially going to be impacted. What does this mean when we zoom out to the kind of macro economy? Well, these jobs are not evenly distributed across the US, right? There are very specific creative hubs where this work is, for the most part, within the United States done. And the estimates in terms of job disruption, so meaning jobs are going to really have to be reorganized in a lot of these different departments as the report breaks out. What does that look like and where are those disruptions going to happen? And the Los Angeles, this region is one of the highest impacts over the next 3 years we forecast. New York being the second, Washington because of some gaming being right there along with Georgia. So local economies, I'm glad to see today we're here at the Los Angeles County Department of Economic Development. These are geographic questions as well as industry questions as we begin to think about what policies need to change. There's going to be a lot of things that just don't exist in the same way. And I think the ability to really in dynamic real time think about what career pathways are, not what they've historically been, right? There's just going to be things that simply do go away. And maybe they weren't big pathways to begin with, but like when you think about animal wrangling, right? Or location scouting in a world where this is empowering virtual production, like some of those are just going to look different and the total head count of people doing them is going to be different. I want to conclude here with, as it relates to this conversation, I think 3 bullet points that stand out. A large number of what is going to be displaced, at least in the near term, the impact is around those entry and mid-level positions. Those career development opportunities are oftentimes where our partners, our DEIA partners, get the foot in the door, right? And if you think about it, whether it's an apprentice editor or any of these entry levels, and it's the same for like how I got to start in economics. It was the drudge, menial, tedious data work. And for these industries, oftentimes those entry level jobs are thankless. They're not great. We all have our own kind of war stories of what those early things were. A lot of them aren't going to just be there, at least in the same form. And so, to the extent we're relying on the form that those have historically taken, we're going to really have to rethink just because they might not be there, right? It's not, I don't think it's a surprise that like giving someone script coverage isn't what it was just a few years ago. like ChatGPT can do that pretty well. So even any of those kind of entry level first jobs or opportunities may look different and may not exist in the same way. And so I think we've got to rethink what that apprenticeship or that early work experience looks like. Um, and these have been historically really critical learning opportunities for folks to get their first start. So with that, I will introduce the moderator of this panel, Greg Hopwood. He's a costume concept artist. He is California based, worked on just about every type of production you can imagine, from big budget productions like The Boys, Echo, Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. And he's made amazing outfits for people like John Legend, Ariana Grande, Lionel Richie, Dolly Parton, Lil Nas X. He's helped bring some of those most iconic and recognizable costumes out there. Give a little love to our moderator, Greg, everyone.
Can everyone hear me? Hello, everyone. I would just say, why don't we all come up here and why don't we just get started? Give a round of applause for our panelists, everyone. All right, so everyone, my name is Greg Hopwood, and welcome to our panel. We have a wonderful group of panelists here for you today, and just a little trigger warning for any creatives in the audience: we will be discussing AI at length. It is that oh so special topic that if you have any artists in your life, you are most likely very sick of hearing about this. But let's address the elephant in the room, me. In hindsight, that sounded like a self-deprecating joke about my weight, but it's not, I promise. And it's just winter weight, and how dare you bring that up? I am a costume concept artist. I've been working in the entertainment industry for about 12 years now. I have spent my life honing my craft, evolving my technological skills, just to have my entire catalog of personal and professional artwork scraped into these generative AI datasets. This was done without my consent, my credit, or my compensation. My industry is currently in turmoil and for the most part ground to a halt as a result of these generative programs. And here I am moderating a panel on the impact of AI. So to say that I have a teensy bit of bias is underplaying it a bit, but let's jump into this, guys. Let's all go down the line and just kind of quickly give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, your profession, and kind of the context of who you are in this discussion of AI.
My name is Andy Cochran. I'm a creative. I spent about a decade in feature film and commercial visual effects. And then the last decade has been slowly transitioning out of traditional into the weird stuff. So a lot of VR, AR, interactive, immersive, live events, projection mapping, installations, apps, anything that is new technology and old craft, basically bringing sort of the storytelling and narrative and you know the skills of the traditional world into new spaces, new audiences, new types of experiences. And so AI is one of many things that I've been tinkering with because it's tech.
My name is Jeanette Moreno King. I'm a supervising director and director mostly in primetime animation. So my job takes a show from script all the way to delivery. I've worked in pretty much every stage of production, so I know these shows backwards, and it's kind of scary that that is going to change. I'm also the president of the Animation Guild, which is an IATSE local 839. I'm in the middle of my second term, and we have an AI task force and myself. We've been trying to educate ourselves so much on trying to get our heads around AI. Our negotiations are coming up. We need to put guardrails in our contract, and we need to be able to inform our members on how things are going to change.
Brilliant, thank you.
My name is Ben Zhao. I'm a professor at University of Chicago in computer science, and my specialty over the last 10 years, I've been doing this for about 20, is in security, and particularly the security of machine learning and AI. In the last year and a half, probably, I've spent nearly every hour of my working day waking days, basically working on adversarial tools to push back against invasive AI. So things like Glaze and Nightshade. But basically, providing technical tools that artists can actually use to push back instead of fluffy things like opt out and, you know, hoping for regulations that will come in a decade when the entire industries are already completely transformed.
Ben is kind of underplaying the fact that he's become a little bit of a symbol of the rebellion for artists when it comes to these generative programs. You're our Mockingjay for the most part at this point.
If I only had her hair.
All right, so now before we really jump in, I just want to get a general census from the audience. So how many people of you are like generally familiar with AI? If you could just raise your hands. Okay, brilliant. So now if I were to start talking about images being scraped, data sets, Lion 5B, who here understands that? Okay, so okay, brilliant. That's more than certain government offices I've been in, so that's good. Okay, so wonderful. Thank you guys. Why don't we just keep that general in mind when we're moving forward, just everyone's knowledge base. So this is a discussion format, so everyone feel free to jump in when it feels right. But why don't we just kick this to Jeanette first? You are both an artist in your own right, and you're the president of the Animation Guild. Can you explain more specifically the impact these generative technologies have had on you personally, professionally, and any like positive and negatives you're really seeing out of the gate?
Since I mostly work primarily in 2D animation, and our software is like, Harmony and Photoshop and Storyboard Pro, I haven't worked on a production yet that has directly impacted what I do.
Mhm.
But on the 3D side, it has definitely been there, and it's been there for a few years. It's mostly machine learning, not generative, but the generative AI takes a lot of infrastructure to be able to use it, and the studios, I think, are trying to figure that out and how to protect their own IP, their own property. So it's coming, but it's not here yet.
Yeah. And how are you seeing it in the people that you're working with? What's the impact that you're seeing amongst your colleagues and the people in the unions?
Mostly right now it's being used on anything that is not coming to air, right? Anything that's on air can't be AI right now because they have to figure out what these copyright cases are going through. They're kind of waiting for the courts to figure it out. So the companies, of course, that are naturally cautious and protective, nobody wants to be the first one to jump out. So we're kind of in this holding pattern right now. I'm seeing it mostly with like pitch decks and really early work where people are maybe exploring or even super early color options, but it just kind of starts there and then it's passed off to the artist. But that mostly affects like, those early designers and those early artists. Eventually it's going to be in the whole pipeline.
Yeah, and just to kind of give context, I work in the film and television industry, but I also work in advertising a lot. So I work with commercials mostly. So I have a quantifiable, I just went through my taxes with my tax accountant. I have a quantifiable amount of annual income that is now gone as a result of these technologies. A lot of commercial ad agencies a lot of banking companies, name any major company, will hire. Instead of the ad agencies hiring artists like me, they are now going and using these technologies, generative programs themselves, and cutting human artists completely out of the equation. So it's directly impacting people. It's not a future far out thing. It's happening now. And to kind of talk about those pitch decks, it's very similar. That used to be a thing that I would help designers pitch work to studios to get jobs. It's all gone now. So it's really happening. So the impact is being felt. It's just the extent of which. But Andy, let's talk about you a little bit. You have a deep history and love for technology. You call yourself a creative technologist, self-proclaimed creative technologist.
Amongst many weird hat
I
titles.
love
sure.
that title so much. All right, so let's talk about kind of your unique upbringing and your experience when the advent of these technologies really kicked off, and kind of where it lands you in this context.
I think I have an interesting sort of perspective on what's happening right now, and an interesting sort of history that has brought me to how I feel. And I think it comes across often that there's empathy and there's sympathy, right? And there's sympathy is like, oh, I'm sorry, that sucks for you. Empathy is like, I feel it. I have an insane amount of empathy for what's going on to you, to all the artists. I don't have a lot of sympathy, and here's why. I came up in visual effects. I was a 3D tracker, which was an entry level job at the time, but I made great money. Lived in California, lots of privilege. Went to college, went to film school. That job was outsourced very quickly after I had it. I can no longer make a living doing that anymore. Roto paint gone. Just tons of sort of entry level jobs have evaporated. My entire visual effects career, the entire decade I was working on movies, every single position I held, including fluid sim expert and VFX supervisor, CG supervisor, I felt like I was running across a collapsing bridge the entire time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you changed your profile to green in 2012 at the Oscars. Anyone? No, not very many. Nobody had empathy or sympathy for us, what was happening. The visual effects community in LA has been decimated by outsourcing and subsidies. And what's happening right now with Gen AI is jobs that felt safe, felt like there was a moat around them, that they were protected because they were creative and special, are now being threatened. And they're being threatened in the exact same way that my jobs have been threatened for the last 15 years, which is make yourself un-outsourceable. That is what I said to myself 15 years ago when I saw this stuff collapsing. Aim for roles that can't be done by an untrained, poorly paid person in another country. The jobs that is really, really, really being decimated now, directly, it's the people that stole our jobs 10 years ago. It's the sweatshops. It's the roto, it's the paint, it's the tracking, the infill. It's the things that are binary and the things that don't actually take human creativity. So my perspective on all of this is fucking put on your shoes and run. I've been running for 20 years and it's coming. It's going to change everything. It's going to hurt all of us. It's going to take away the things we love deeply. I loved tracking. I loved it. Like, I genuinely love tracking. It's gone. I can't do that. Society doesn't owe me that. So we need to find new things. And these Gen AI tools, they don't know what to make. They still need a human. There still needs to be a creative that decides what we're going to do and what's good. So yeah, they're going to take away menial tasks. They're going to take away pitch decks, which I got a whole thing about pitch decks. But the reality of what we're facing right now is it's not just some jobs. It is the fundamental way in which humans use computers. We now have a free sweatshop sitting under our desk that will do all the menial stuff that we either don't want to do, can't do, or need to do at volume. So what does that mean? And if you're an artist, it means huge empowerment. You have a machine that will do all the boring stuff, and it's going to do it for free. So what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward as a society? That's where we are.
It's not really free.
Yeah, I mean, an NVIDIA GPU is several $1,000s. No, and it's not free. It's free for now is the other thing too, because these are all about to become very expensive services. It's going to be, 50, 60 bucks a month times 7 services if you want to, really take advantage of everything. So yeah, no, it's not free, but it's free.
But no, it's also comes down to that cost. It's whether it's fiscal or kind of cultural or emotional,
Yeah.
It's I'm curious what everyone's experience with like the artist in their life has been. I can tell you that it's getting pretty dark out there for artists. But also it's that discussion of a tool versus a replacement technology is a very important thing. And I have my friend Dina over there that I feel like could who I feel channeling through me right now, wanting to talk about kind of that balance of new technologies. And a successful new technology is a job that when it is in fact a tool, creates more jobs than it replaces. And when it becomes unbalanced and a replacement technology basically eradicates more jobs than it creates, when those new jobs are very minimal. And I'm curious what you guys really think in that discussion of, is this a tool or is this a replacement technology? Feel free to jump in.
Well, I did leave out some of the ways that it's impacted
Yeah,
some of
go
the
for it.
animation stuff. So like in Rick and Morty, one of the most tedious parts of animation is dealing with crowds, right? And the AI can do crowds based off of just a few models that are input, and it can generate like a crowd, and then it can generate the animation in the crowd so that that crowd is alive. That is happening on some shows right now, but it's not. It's a job loss because we outsource our animation. That is job loss in Canada, or to like the vendor studio that we work with. That job might come back, right? Like the person that's working on that crowd, they might come back and it would be somebody who's looking over what the AI is spitting out. Right now it's kind of a black box. It's hard to see what the studios have in mind. It's hard to see how the artist is supposed to interact with this tool because we're not going to know until they unveil it. And that machine learning stuff is layered on top of the inputs that the Gen AI scrapes, these like inputs from all over the place. And if the courts decide that that's not a viable input, then what happens to that tool that the studio has spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to develop? We don't know, right?
So I guess I can jump in on the impact question. So I'm an outsider. I'm not an artist. And my perspectives, I think, quite a bit different, perhaps more broad, perhaps more narrow, depending on how you look at it. When I first started interacting with this entire space was a day in November 2022 when I was invited to a online town hall hosted by Nicole and others at the CAA and Carla Ortiz and everybody. And I sat there sort of open jawed listening to about 500 plus artists talk about how generative AI had turned their life upside down. But since then, I've talked to so many different people across different industries, authors, composers, choreographers, every career you can imagine that involves any sort of human creativity, and everyone is in a panic because they are seeing the job losses. I would probably estimate that in the last, 16 months-ish, that I've interacted with quite a few thousand artists across the globe, on every social platform, via emails, via conversations, whatever. And boy, the impact is ginormous. I know everyone here is feeling the local impact of it, and we're discussing that right now, but there are countries where people are getting doxxed online, attacked intentionally for any sort of resistance towards the AI behemoth that their government has explicitly endorsed. There are countries where media is afraid to discuss anything that is anti-AI because for fear of backlash by the government. There are countries where, entire industries of voice actors are being told to line up, to walk into a booth and to record single phrases, not for any legitimate purpose, but for the explicit purpose of training a model that will replace them with that explicit intent. So yeah, all this is happening, but addition to the job loss, which is, I think there are other experts here, and Dina always laughs when I start with this phrase, which is, I don't talk about job loss as much is because I'm not an economist, and I know a lot of economists, and they would be really upset if I did talk about it. But when I look at the bigger picture of not only are these industries decimated, I interact with, tons of people who are not just artists, but also parents of artists, parents of aspiring artists, art curators, museum curators, faculty at art colleges. And when I talk to them, they are deathly afraid of not just impact to their immediate loved ones and themselves, but to the future of human creativity. When I talk to faculty at art colleges and they tell me about the numbers dropping And I had a faculty, or I forget what her title was, some sort of manager, higher level campus person, come up to me after a keynote and just sort of, please, Ben, what do I tell these parents whose kids are dropping out that they should stay in school, that they should stay in art school, that art is still a viable job in the future? And, there are times when I don't have a good answer to that. So, but I also see the future, and I see that the way that generative AI is going, it's going to implode on itself because it cannot survive without human creativity. And, to the question about what the cost is it free? No, again, I'm not an artist, but from my perspective, it's never been free. The cost has been the works and the personal work product of tens of thousands and more of artists who already exist. And that is the cost. So my concern is that when these industries implode and shrink, and when these aspiring artists drop out, there will be no one else to train AI. 10 years down the road, when they need someone to fix AI, there will be no one, because AI is only as good as its data. There is not a single ethical AI model out there. And trust me, I've checked every single time some new product comes out. The first thing that some artist does is they email me or they DM me on every platform, Discord, Twitter, Blue Sky, you name it. And I get all the questions, and I dig a little bit. And sometimes it's with a little bit of data laundering. Sometimes it's a second generation tool that only used the first generation tool to generate the training and the label data. So it's a little bit laundered, but it's all the same. There's not been a single effective model that's been trained on actually legitimate license data, right? And legitimate meaning you didn't, grandfather your magical terms of service back 30 years to back in the days before, AI was a thing, and you all know who I'm talking about. So yeah, and that's my concern, is that in 30 years, I'm going to be sitting around and be forced to watch ads and TV shows and videos of all the same level of bullshit that it is right now, and there'll be no one else to make it better. And that's my greatest fear. So that's why I'm doing all this.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's just, I would love you to kind of discuss a little bit about what kind of data is currently in the data sets. Where does it come from? How wide sweeping is it? Because I know as of very recently, I believe it was, I don't know any companies I can or cannot mention here, but there was a cell phone company, a technology company that basically said they're going to start scraping text messages, emails, everything off your phones, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your private messages, all of those things, all those private little things that you guys think are hidden and shared secret. It's all being scraped into these data sets. And there's a possibility that some of these data sets may become public one day as a result of transparency to allow perfect. Okay, so why don't we make a hard pivot into hard timing pivot into some, let's talk about some hope and some actionable items. Now that we've discussed the harms. There are a lot of things happening, at least in the film and entertainment industry. Jeanette, can you kind of just poke at like the contract negotiation side of things without giving anything away? But kind of talk about, is there hope in the entertainment industry for this technology?
Well, we're just getting started, but at least for the below line workers with IATSE, they're negotiating right now. The good thing is that a lot of these forces we have been in a hot labor summer, and it's going to continue into a hot labor, second summer. And they pattern, a lot of these negotiations are built on patterns. Thank you, WGA, for sticking your neck out for all of us and kind of making it happen. And then SAG right behind them, and the badass Teamsters that are just like,
Thank
it's
you.
yeah, it's insane. So that pattern is being set. Hopefully it will continue. And I hope that some of it, there's no doubt, some of this technology is incredible, like really amazing. And my hope is that it means that we can make amazing art and better shows within the time that we have right now, right? Because sometimes these jobs can be crushing. You know, put in a lot of overtime. You know, on the live action side, you don't get to see your family for months. You know, if AI can fix that, great. You know, then we get to go home, see our families, and make amazing art all at the same time.
Make it a tool, not a replacement technology.
Yes,
Gotcha.
and I do hope that if, even if some of those lower level jobs are lost, that we find another way, because we need new people coming in all the time, you know, from diverse backgrounds with different viewpoints, and everybody's voice is valid. And if the AI is trained on voices from the past, how are they going to be able to speak to humans in the future? So that's my hope. They're going to need us.
Brilliant.
I can,
Yeah, go
I
for it,
can,
please.
I can jump onto that and add to that. What's happening right now is the facts that we were given just before this panel, it's catastrophic for entry level and mid level. It's catastrophic for anything that an unthinking, non-creative machine can compete with humans. There isn't a person in this room that came to Hollywood with the intention of being a cog. Everyone in this room wanted to do something creative, right? To maybe not, be an A-list something or other, but you came here to do art, right? To be creative, to be a human. What's happening is a lot of the stuff that we have to do for money is being very threatened right now. The stuff we hate doing, the ads, the pitch decks, the menial stuff, that is absolutely at risk. What is popping up like flowers out of the battlefield in it is opportunity, which is, if you look at what's happening online with Instagram, YouTube Reels, TikTok, you have creators that are going straight from high school, college to a mass audience. They're skipping the mailroom, the grunt work. They're basically empowered by these technologies to create. And I'm not just talking about AI. I'm talking about iPhones and and Blender, and AI is a piece of what's happening right now. It's not democratization because we're not voting on anything. It's just barrier destroying. And so if you are diverse, if you are disadvantaged, you've kind of never had a better opportunity to actually be a creative than right now. I came up through what I call the pirate ship below decks of visual effects. It was a factory. It was an absolute factory. And that's the reason why all those jobs have been outsourced, because it was a product and we were cogs and our jobs were not creative. We were not making movies. We were pushing pixels into movies. Right now, if you're a young creative or somebody's shifting career or a frustrated creative and your livelihood is eroding in your hands, it's not the end of the world. It's the shitty stuff you don't like that's eroding. It's the boring stuff. It's the masking. It's the painting. It's the repetitive and awful, the stuff that, and again, not just AI, it's a lot of software and hardware. The opportunities right now for individual creatives to be massively productive and visible to the world is unparalleled. And AI is part of that. And we need to talk about it as a society and focus on it, but we also need to be really careful that we don't let big IP and big tech drive our emotions against our own best interests to push for copyright extension that makes it illegal to be inspired by something, things like that. So we just need to talk like this and focus on the human things. These machines, this AI doesn't think. It's not artificially intelligent. It's machine learning. It's a computer that learns something. It doesn't think anything. It's derivative. So we just have to harness it. We have to. It's here. It's not going away. Sorry. Bean counters are not going to be like, oh, sorry, I guess we'll be canceled. It's here. We have to deal with it, but we can't just fight it. We have to judo it. We have to use its energy to our advantage, because we're not going to just stop this, but we need art and artists, and that's what we need to do now.
Ben, why don't you take us home with some hope and some actionables? Come on, Mockingjay.
Oh, Jesus. Thanks a lot, Greg. I'm never talking to you again.
Hope someone from
No
Lionsgate's
pressure.
here.
So, I mean, just before we talk about the positive stuff, I talked to, I'm sorry. I I did a testimony remote on Zoom yesterday or the day before, I forget, with the state of Illinois, some hearing on AI and medical stuff. And one thing that struck me was that across multiple industries, the first reaction to AI is often very similar, which is this is going to be great. This is going to help me save time. This is going to help me get more time with my patients. This is going to help me code better, write better software, more software so I can have more creativity. And unfortunately, at least in many cases I've seen, that's not what actually happens. What actually happens is that the economics drives things in a different way. It's the CEOs and your managers who want to downsize for no reason other than the fact that they can. And so when they say, yeah, you can be more productive, what they really mean is now you're going to get the same pay, except now you're going to replace your entire team with just you, and you're going to be expected to do 5x more work. And this is not going to give you more time with your family. This is not going to give you more vacation time. This is not going to allow you to be more creative. This is just going to be more work. And on top of which your hands are tied because you're using this tool that has a very limited API, which doesn't allow you to actually freeform anything. It just allows you to build within the confines of these dumb little prompts that is trained on your friends and people you admire. Okay, so the dark side aside, I swear I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm less of the mind that we're gonna work with this. I'm more of the mind of we're gonna burn it all down. So I apologize for that to start with. So Glaze started as a project that day after hearing that town hall in 2022, and it's as of January, it was down to a few million, 2.2 million downloads or whatever. There are entire organizations in different countries that use Glaze, but Glaze was designed to protect individual artists from being targeted, right? So if your art is really good and someone really likes your style, they can just go off and build a lore on you and just suck you into a model, and then boom, you're done. Your career, for many intents and purposes, is over because now AI has sucked you in. So Glaze was designed to protect you against that. Nightshade, which we released in January, I guess, the actual tool, is meant to try to push back and to force companies to actually stop training on unauthorized data by just making it more expensive. The data that you can run through Nightglaze basically distorts the association between the prompt and what AI sees visually when it parses your image. So I can make a cat look like a dog, but it's still labeled as a cat because when these little classifier tools try to extract the contents of an image, they look with classification tools and they're not affected by Nightshade. So they find that it's still a cat, except when the generator model looks at it, it finds that it has big floppy ears and a long bushy tail and all those things that make it look like a dog. And so the models end up basically training, outputting dogs when you ask for cats. So the hope is not that we're going to make OpenAI bankrupt, although frankly, I wouldn't shed much tears. The goal is to make it more challenging for them to keep doing this, so that if they don't want crappy models that output things that have nothing to do with the prompt, or they don't want model collapse, then they have to do things like try to develop antidotes, and those are difficult because we're trying. And then they have to deploy them at scale because they're going to need that 500 million set of images for their next model update. And when you multiply anything against 500 million, it's going to be expensive. And that's the goal. We're trying to make it so expensive that they're going to end up basically looking at the equations of it and basically saying, it actually costs less money to go hire an artist to give us some training data. That is the point. That is the point. That is the goal.
It's getting that credit, consent, and compensation for artists and their work. And I think just to kind of end an additional note, you have certain countries looking for things like the EU AI Act has passed, and they're voting it, and I think some point this month, basically making it where data sets cannot operate without the approval of the copyright holders of all their contents and their data sets. You have the unions waking up and pushing for ethical regulations. you have artists rebelling in their own special ways. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And I think if we could end this on any note, I would say support artists. Find an artist that you know, buy some artwork, buy a print, and just fight for human artistry. I think that's a good way to end it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Give it up for our panelists, everyone.